Welcome to the Geostrategic Podcast.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us as we tear into the latest intelligence and research that matters to you. At 14,000 feet, where engines lose power and humans struggle to breathe, China is building something that could redefine how wars are fought. 16 high-altitude air bases, stealth fighters, combat drones, ballistic missiles positioned on the roof of the world. For decades, the Himalayas protected India by default. Today, that natural shield may be disappearing engineered out of relevance. This isn't routine border defense, it's escalation control by design, and it could decide the first hours of any future conflict. If you want clear, no-nonsense analysis on how power is shifting in Asia, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who follows geopolitics. And now I want your view. Does this build-up stabilize the border or make war more likely? Drop your opinion in the comments. Agree, disagree, just bring your best argument. So we have been provided with this just staggering collection of deep analysis. It details the sheer scale, the strategic intent, and really the hard operational reality of China's transformation of the Tibetan Plateau.
It's a total transformation.
Right. And our mission today is to dig into what this infrastructure truly means, the long-term geostrategic implications of this, this high-altitude fortress.
And what's fascinating, and the sources really back this up, is that this isn't an evolutionary change. It's revolutionary. They're basically constructing an entirely new theater of conflict.
Designed specifically for what?
To negate geographical advantages that have, stood for millennia. This is a system built, fundamentally, to change the balance of power decisively.
Okay, let's start with the scale, because it's hard to wrap your head around. We're talking about the PLAAF, the People's Liberation Army Air Force building, or massively expanding at least 16 high-altitude air bases along the border with India.
This line of actual control, yeah.
16. I mean, what does it even take to make a base functional at an altitude where people need oxygen tanks just to work?
The scale it's almost absurd. These bases like Lunze, which is just 40 kilometers from Arunachal Pradesh, or Tingri near Mount Everest.
That's at 14,100 feet.
Exactly. They are operating where conventional military aviation it hits a wall. The thin air means reduced lift, reduced thrust.
Right. The sources we saw estimate up to a 50% drop in engine performance.
That's the conventional assumption, yeah. So to compensate, you have to engineer these massive modifications.
So if you lose half your engine power, you need a lot more runway just to get airborne safely.
Precisely. They're building these extended runways to get the takeoff safety margins they need. And it's not just runways. It's reinforced, hardened hangars, underground fuel depots, missile storage facilities.
All designed to withstand counterstrikes.
It's permanent architecture.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the human cost. That's almost as telling as the financial cost. We know that workers have relied on oxygen, sometimes even IV fluids, just to get the work done.
Which just shows the strategic premium Beijing is placing on this, on overcoming geography itself.
Oh, absolutely.
And speaking of cost, the figures we saw put this whole program, conservatively, at over $20 billion US. That is an eye-watering figure for infrastructure in such an extreme environment.
And that $20 billion is a critical point. It's not just for the bases. That accounts for everything. The hardened shelters, the missile sites, the massive logistics hubs, the fiber optic cables connecting it all.
Give us some context for that number.
I mean, to put that in perspective for you, that amount of capital is comparable to, say, building an entire aircraft carrier strike group. Or it's several years of India's total defense capital budget just for that one sector.
Wow.
They're investing at a level that signals a decades-long commitment to making this theater operational, no matter how hard it is.
So they've thrown engineering muscle and $20 billion at the altitude problem. Okay, so what kind of firepower are they actually fielding on those new runways? Let's talk about the integrated arsenal that turns these from defensive outposts into launching pads for dominance.
Yeah, the deployments show a really comprehensive layered strategy. It's all aimed at multi-domain superiority. It's about creating redundancy and, just overwhelming sensor coverage.
And where does that start?
It starts critically with continuous ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. This is coming from high-altitude endurance drones, HALE drones, like the CH-5 and the newer stealth-optimized CH-7.
And the beauty of the HALE platforms is their loiter time, right? They can stay on station for a full day, sometimes more.
24 hours plus, yeah. Providing these continuous eyes on the line of actual control. And the stealth version, the CH-7, that's designed specifically to penetrate disputed airspace and to challenge sophisticated radars.
Like India's Uttama-Isa radar.
Exactly. If you can evade those radars, you significantly lower India's early warning and response times. You're effectively blinding their defense network in the first hours of a conflict.
But surveillance doesn't win wars. You need kinetic platforms. That brings us to the forward placement of the J-20 Mighty Dragon stealth fighters. How does its presence change the game at 14,000 feet?
That's where the tech specs become strategic leverage. The J-20 uses supercruise.
So it can maintain supersonic speed without using afterburners, which, I mean, they just guzzle fuel.
Right, and at high altitude where every drop of fuel counts, supercruise is vital. It lets the J-20 sustain those speeds, maximizing its range from these remote bases. It can engage targets deeper and stay on station longer.
And it carries the PL-15 long-range missiles.
So it can engage targets before it's even detected, let alone targeted.
But, putting your most valuable fifth-gen fighter on a forward base seems risky. It feels like you're violating that principle of redundancy. If India can target those 16 bases, they can take out high-value assets fast.
That's a fair point, and is why the deployment is truly layered. They mitigate that risk with what they call collaborative combat.
Okay. What's that?
This is where they bring in the GJ-11 combat collaborative aircraft. Think of them as loyal wingmen.
So these are unmanned platforms?
Essentially, yes. They're expendable drones that fly alongside manned jets like the J-20 or the electronic warfare variant, the J-16D.
So the GJ-11 isn't just an extra missile truck, it's a force multiplier.
Absolutely. It expands sensor coverage, it can act as a sacrificial decoy, it conducts electronic warfare, and yes, it delivers munitions, all while keeping the valuable pilot in that complex J-20 out of the immediate line of fire.
A human-unmanned pairing.
Operationalized at altitude. It enhances both survivability and lethality. And you have to remember, the J-20s are the quality, but they have older J-10s and J-11s providing the numerical mass. Over 100 aircraft ready for forward ops.
That network of air power is significant, but the real strategic anchor, the thing that integrates it all, that has to be the presence of the rocket force.
That's what connects the tactical air battle to the strategic level. Yeah. The sources show that PLARF, the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force, has ballistic missile brigades integrated directly alongside several of these air bases.
And we're talking about DF-21s and the more capable DF-26s.
The DF-26 is critical. It has a strike range of up to 4,000 kilometers.
4,000 kilometers. So this complex isn't just about controlling the immediate border. This allows Beijing to hold at risk every major airbase, logistics hub, and command center deep inside India.
Precisely. It creates an integrated strike complex. Air power handler of the local dominance, while the ballistic missiles provide that immediate threat of overwhelming conventional strikes against critical national infrastructure. It just fundamentally changes the game.
Which brings us to the big question. Why? Why now? Why is China willing to bear this enormous human and financial cost to overcome the limitations of the Tibetan Plateau? What's the strategic context here?
I think the intention is clear. It's rapid escalation dominance. The goal isn't just to defend the border. It's to seize the initiative across air, missile, and information domains in the first few hours of any crisis.
And by making the deployment permanent and so technologically integrated, they deny India its traditional advantage.
Right, that defensive mountainous terrain. They're engineering control over the pace and the intensity of any future conflict.
And the primary catalyst for accelerating all this permanent year-round infrastructure, it seems to be the Galwan Valley clashes in 2020.
Galwan was a massive operational wake-up call for Beijing. The clashes, as brutal as they were interpreted by Chinese military planners not as a political failure, but as a logistical and response time problem.
That's a fascinating way to look at it.
Their conclusion was basically this. The side that can mobilize air power, accurate fire, and ISR assets fastest at altitude will determine how any escalation plays out.
So instead of being deterred, they saw an infrastructural gap they needed to fill permanently.
That's the strategic takeaway. Galwan accelerated the shift from seasonal deployments to permanent hardened military zones. They poured resources into roads, high-speed rail, fiber optics across Tibet and Xinjiang.
Which shortens their mobilization timeline.
Drastically.
Yeah.
It decisively shifts what we call the crisis stability equation in China's favor.
Okay, for anyone unfamiliar with that term, what does shifting the crisis stability equation mean in plain English?
It means China now has less incentive to back down in a crisis because they believe they can achieve their objectives faster and with more certainty. On the flip side, India has less time to react or mobilize before its critical infrastructure is threatened or destroyed.
So Beijing is planning for the long term?
The scale of this signals they're planning for a high-intensity contingency, one that requires continuous dominance. They're forcing New Delhi to live perpetually under a military shadow.
Let's move to the crucial so what for India and the region, this erosion of India's long-standing geographic buffer. The sources we looked at really emphasize that the Himalayas are being engineered out of relevance.
The cumulative effect of this permanent distributed network is, well, it's devastating to India's traditional defense calculus. You no longer have that luxury of strategic depth.
So first, there's a targeting problem.
A huge one. The network forces India to target 16 reinforced redundant nodes. It just dilutes the effectiveness of any counter-air strategy. You need massive distributed strikes just to suppress PLAAF operations.
And second, it introduces this profound strategic vulnerability.
By placing this highly coercive power right on India's doorstep, the integrated air and missile power directly threatens India's critical nodes, and none is more critical than the Siliguri corridor.
The chicken neck.
The chicken neck. It's a narrow strip of land, maybe only 22 kilometers wide at points, that is the sole land connection between India's mainland and its 7 northeastern states.
An existential choke point.
Absolutely. Our sources cite unnamed Indian security officials who have specifically warned that these new bases could potentially isolate India's northeastern states in the first hours of a conflict.
That is an existential implication for India's internal cohesion, its military mobility, its ability to even sustain a conflict there.
Right. So the Tibetan Plateau transforms from this massive protective buffer into an active launching pad for coercive power. The Himalayas are being redefined as a multi-layered networked battlefield.
And many defense assessments see this as mirroring China's strategy in the South China Sea.
It's the same A2AD or anti-accessory denial playbook. You combine stealth, long-range missiles, and advanced collaborative systems to raise the cost of entry for any adversary to a crippling level. The goal is local air superiority within hours.
Now, India is responding. We've seen them upgrading bases like Neoma, deploying Rafale fighters, investing in tunnels. But the sources still highlight a significant asymmetry.
The asymmetry is less about specific aircraft types and more about scale and integration. India is taking crucial steps, yes. But China's investment reflects a total state-directed industrial capacity and long-term planning. Their air, missile, and infrastructure networks are fully integrated.
Whereas India's response is more piecemeal.
It often consists of isolated upgrades, which, while capable, means New Delhi is confronting this ever-widening gap in holistic operational capability. Ultimately, the core takeaway for you is this. China's massive buildup signals that their leadership is planning not for border skirmishes, but for a long-term, high-intensity contingency that requires continuous air dominance and information superiority. The strategic space for India to challenge escalation dynamics through traditional means is it's demonstrably shrinking.
And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over. Historical experience shows uncontrolled militarization at disputed borders only reinforces security dilemmas, making conflict more likely. Given the permanent billions of dollars nature of this infrastructure and China's stated goal of achieving long-term dominance and rapid escalation control, does this relentless pursuit of military superiority make meaningful confidence-building measures and eventual demilitarization along the line of actual control functionally impossible? Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the provided source material on China's high-altitude fortress architecture and its regional implications. If you found this analysis valuable, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and check out our other deep dives wherever you listen or watch. We'll catch you next time.